Adaptive Robotic Systems. That is quite an introduction. Stu, thank you so much for joining us. You very graciously have accepted our invitation, sight unseen, to come meet with a group of Quakers. You can imagine how scary that might have sounded. So I thought that it would be enjoyable for us to just have an initial conversation here, and then you folks jump in when you want. But the sort of standard first question is, you a Portland boy student?
I lived in Portland for 33 years.
There you go. That's good enough. All right. So in terms of, you work in robotics, which is obviously not the exact same thing as artificial intelligence, but it's certainly crossing over here.
It is, and I would say that I work in AI proper. I'm glad that you started the conversation earlier with really just noting that AI, as we experience it, is a commercial interest, right? So every single time you log on to a browser, some machine learning algorithm is trying to persuade you in some direction. That's everywhere on the internet, every single time. What I do is I develop synthetic nervous systems that mimic biology. So the circuitry in your leg, in your back, that do the automatic things like walking and balance control. Really disconnected from what's going on in the brain, but informed. And the distinction that I would make is that there are two different identities of AI. And I would say that one is capital letters. AI, what we think of, right? That's what I think. The other would be lowercase letters, which is what it actually is. And AI, lowercase letters, is not actually AI as we understand it. It's not even close. Right? So we think of AI, we think of human-like intelligence, we think of doing things automatically, we think on some level that the robot dog is self-aware, right? That it can learn. It's not. These large language models, they cannot learn. They cannot improve, they run a program. The robot dog is a program, not learning, not growing. It doesn't exist. And we're not close to it. For context, we do make large neural models. They run tens of millions of dollars. Those have that very steep energy cost. Training ChatGPT and GPT takes roughly half of Portland's energy budget for the year. To put that into context, there's not enough electricity on the planet to create the kind of AI that we think of being. You talk to ChatGPT for 5 minutes, it uses more electricity than you will use in your lifetime. That's very big mismatch, which is why we're interested in AI. It's cheap. But biology works opposite of what we think. Right? So neurons, they send electricity to each other in pulses. Not a lot going on there. But when you put it together and you start to form patterns, that's where it really becomes relevant. Right? So AI, capital letters, we're in our infancy. We're thinking about things like image recognition. I look everywhere but the brain. I'm interested in motion. What's the intelligence behind it? You can walk down the street safely, look at your phone, having a conversation, angry about what's going on, have no idea how you walked across 5 streets to get where you
Yeah.
which has some pretty big implications. Your brain doesn't know how to walk. Your brain knows very little about how to walk. Your eyes don't control it, your eyes can just walk. Your lower limbs do. Your lower limbs do the walking. Muscle memory is local circuitry dialed in. The reason that that distinction is so important is that biomechanics research has proven definitively that walking is an optimization problem. Every as you're walking along, your body is automatically reducing how much energy it takes. Brain has no idea. Brain has no control. When the brain gets involved, it makes small corrections. Then it lets go, you go back to your phone, and the body's automatically doing this, this, you can call it learning, you should get better at optimizing this, but you walk with less and less energy, which is why we sometimes trip over our feet, right? The brain is over, or the local circuitry is overcompensating because it's cheaper. So AI capital letters is not going to happen in our lifetime, which is great, right? The robot overlords, they're not going. They can't on this planet anytime soon. It's important to me to make that distinction because AI lowercase is dangerous. And it's not dangerous because of the technology itself. It's dangerous because of the people who are using it, right? Yeah. Like I said, every instant you spend on the internet, somebody is trying to persuade you either to use their stuff, to purchase this, or their commercial interests. And the reason we think lowercase AI is uppercase AI is exactly the same. We identify with AI, we have a mental picture of what that means, and what that means is not what we think it is. But the commercial interest has no intention of clearing that up because when they clear that up, they have to think of the catchphrases. Right? And AI is glorious because early science fiction used that as a way of talking about social constructs that don't currently exist. Right? That's what it was all about. And Heinlein especially had these ideas of what if machines be like people? And other authors were involved, and that's been a very big deal in our storytelling in all forms. So now when we think of AI, we have all kinds of images, what kinds of stories to draw from, and to ask the very legitimate question, where are we with this? Where is it going, and how's that likely to affect me? Good news, the robots aren't coming. Bad news, the advertisers are.
Yes, that's a thank you. So let me follow that up with one of my favorite questions, which is, so what in your work, what are you the most excited about, the most positive and excited about, and what are you the most concerned about? Now, maybe that duplicates some of the things you said, but I'd like to hear you ruminate on those two.
I would say that the most exciting thing about my work is learning that the person in charge of this body is the least intelligent thing about this. It's in a very real way. My body, it's a 500,000 years of getting better all the time. It's an incredibly advanced machine. You're driving it, not so much. That's really cool. And I guess the way that I would expand on that is to note that when I think of Florida's machine, I think of precision. I think of getting it right the first time and being able to do that over and over and over. Right? I'm trained as an engineer. That's how I see the world. How do I make this system better and more precise? Biology doesn't care about precision. It never has. It doesn't care about repeatability. Never has. That's not how we are crazy imprecise. You try standing still. You stand still for long enough and you'll start to sway back and forth. The reason is because we're dynamic machines, right? Our signals moving through our body are always moving, and we will adapt to staying still and then we'll follow. So we don't. We sway back and forth. We move in very continuous ways. Robots are only continuous because of laws of physics. Otherwise, they would be there and then there instant. And it turns out that when we start to approach problem solving the way that biology does, we see some benefits. Like I said before, you spend a few minutes talking to ChatGPT, you're consuming more electricity than your body will ever use. So what's exciting about my work is that I get to start with robotics and then reverse the priorities. And the more that we can develop these biological systems and just learn about the nature, the more we are able to do things like conserve, right? So I use very little electricity. We all do. That's awesome. I'm able to move throughout any terrain because of the way that evolution has made my body able to adapt, right? Which is why humanoid robots are becoming so popular, because our environments are optimal. And so the robot doesn't really make sense in the human environment. That's what's exciting is what this kind of research we're thinking. Maybe what we think is so great isn't. What's I guess alarming.
Alarming or concerning?
What's concerning is I would say noticing how no matter how much things change, they remain the same. Right? So you can look back and when you move past the first layer in human history, you can see patterns of behavior that have always been, right? And media, social media are all really good examples of what happens, I guess, when the not so smart gets a hold of new ways to manipulate other people. So the worry is not that the robots are doing it, it's that I create better ways of other people to manipulate folks. That's what's cool. The science itself is awesome. The more we learn, literally the less, right? So from my vantage point, intelligence is a descending thing where the lower you go, the smarter it is. So my right hand, my left hand, incredibly intelligent. Putting them together, that's great. The monkey driving, not so much. And I think that if we can bring that understanding into conversation, into our thinking, where maybe we challenge this notion of excellence being precision. That's exciting. It also feels kind of like a race, right? Can we produce the kind of science that influences this conversation in super positive ways before the misuse of our discoveries dwarfs anything that we can bring to the table?
Yeah.
that's actually interesting that you mentioned that at the end of your comments here. Do you feel in any sense chased by commercial interests in terms of your own research? Are you having to look over your shoulder?
Yes. Yeah, there's always this, I guess I live with this ever-present question in the back of my head: am I creating the underpinnings of Skynet? Right? And am I doing the research that will lead to the Terminator universe? And more urgently, am I creating the next machine learning? Am I creating the next discovery for the advertisers to get that much better at control of everyone's emotions?
Now, just out of curiosity, you chose to do your work at Portland State. Is that because the program at Portland State has these particular concerns, or is there a wide variety of concerns that just happens to be one of them?
So, I've been fascinated by robotics for as long as I can remember, but I was born in the 70s, a child of the early 80s, at a time when I distinctly remember not knowing from one day to the next if humanity was going to blow itself up, because I come from, like my first memories were in the Cold War. So robots are neat, but my general impression was that they were companies. It felt like a childish pursuit. So I started with thermal fluids, went into atmospheric turbulence, and in the process of moving into the PhD program at Portland State, we went on a tour. So I got to walk through all the labs, and the moment I walked into the lab that I currently work in, I knew that my life was not facing the right trajectory. I have never in my life woken up early and thought, you know what I want to do? I want to read about atmospheric turbulence. Once have I ever experienced this. I do, however, wake up early to read about which means I read a lot about neuroscience, I read a lot about robotics, advanced prosthetics, because I mean, basically I cyborg brains. That's in a nutshell what I do, and it's fascinating. It's so cool to start with neurons that work like little neurons, and with a robot keeping its balance using a synthetic nerve. That's really cool. Yes.
2 weeks ago, yesterday, I heard a fellow describing the fact that he had a foot amputated, and his earlier roommate had been working in prosthetics, and they're just on the cutting edge. And so they made a neurological connection to his prosthesis. That sounds like something you're working. What do you know about that, or what can you add to that?
What I do is most closely related to that. I am, so the idea there is that the machine is interacting directly with the nervous system. I am a half step outside of that interaction, just on the robot side, right? So there's people who work just on the biology side of that. How do we communicate directly with the nervous system? But right on the edge, we speak the same language. We understand synthetic nervous systems the same way.
So in that case, there's a connection between the neuro system and the robotic foot.
Yes, but I would hedge that by clarifying that the neural systems in the robot and the neural systems in the biology are many orders of magnitude.
Incompatible.
Yeah, they're not directly compatible. The nuances of biology are vast. And our models by comparison are laughably simple. So my models, they seek to communicate neuron to neuron in an approximate capacity, but the electrochemical nuances, the adaptability, so we think that many neurons have more than one job. We're not at that. We might be soon, but one neuron does one job. Or I guess there's two eventualities, right? Either the neuron itself has one job, or we have a black box with a whole bunch of neurons. We have no idea what any of them is. And that second example is lowercase AI that you see in the media and in these large language models.
This is just another question, not necessarily segueing with Irv's question, but just in honor of your shirt, NASA, that you're wearing, and the fact that today a private company in Texas is going to land on the moon, maybe at this moment, right now, sometime today. I was wondering if this AI technology, as far as its connection to robotics, is helping that right now with navigation and that sort of thing. Do you know if that those two fields have kind of come together?
So I don't have the information and comments specifically on that project.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that the machine learning capacity that we have, that we call AI, is highly, I don't say adaptable, because once you create it, it doesn't adapt, but we can tweak it to any system that we have a question and a set of solutions, right? And the more question and answers we have, the more we can tune into what we want it to do. That strategy, that machine learning strategy, is really an optimization, but we can optimize things blindly at will. And we use that ability to train our guidance systems, to train our robots, to train other things to work with. So in my research, I have a whole bunch of neurons, but they have internal values that I need to solve. I need to make these behave in a controllable way to do what I want it to do. And so I use those machine learning strategies to make my synthetic nervous systems work. So in that capacity, using it as a tool for system tuning and system creation is ubiquitous. We do that all the time, and it's done everywhere. And you can go on the internet and find 1,000 people who want to sell you something that will do that to your system. In that capacity, whether or not it goes deeper and there's AI actually doing things, I would say that it has a lower probability than you might think, because as an engineer, I don't like those machine learning algorithms, because once they're solved into a solution, it's a black box. Mathematically speaking, I have no idea how it does what it's doing, because it will find a random internal configuration to answer the questions the way that I want to answer. But I don't know how it's doing that. And so I can't predict outliers. I can use it to train things that I do understand, but it is, it's inherently nebulous. And engineers hate that. So I would expect that this private company putting people into space with that human cost, or spending all that money with one chance of landing on the moon, you really don't want a system tuned that you don't understand. So we tend not to put those things in charge.
Thanks for the information about electricity and how much AI uses electricity. Have any individuals or groups been looking at the relation of that to global warming, for instance? If some generation of electricity approaches like coal or something like that, actually contribute to carbon and perhaps global warming. Should people concerned about climate change make a conscientious stand against the use of AI in order to save the planet? I'm overstating.
I think that it's universally wise to think in terms of how much of the available resources are we consuming across the board for end use. With that in mind, the conversation is really complicated when the counter argument starts with, let's talk about some of the things that we're able to do with this thing, right? So the most obvious is weather prediction. My phone can now tell me very precisely as I move from here across the city what to expect weather-wise. My phone, as I'm moving, can alert me to anything that's in my way that I might need to not. And my shoes are meant to be beneficial forever, right? So our lives are enhanced in innumerable ways by the use of this technology. And at the same time, we can and should be inherently concerned about how much energy we're using in areas. Hopefully, these very high energy costs will compel us to drive toward the kinds of things that we wanted to do, right? Save energy, conserve, maybe be less inclined to think that more precise is better. We should always be concerned, but we should also recognize the complexity of the conversation and respect that.
Other questions? Yes.
Do you have an idea of how much we're relying on artificial intelligence learning machines now? Because it just occurred to me that with that kind of expenditure in electricity, if say a government becomes dependent on an AI to make decisions or say trim budgets, and then say we have an unstable situation where we have brownouts and things like that. But, I mean, or a cruise missile strike on a power facility. Just how dependent are we going to be on this? And shouldn't we avoid that?
So, start with the bad news. The bad news is that everybody in this room is profoundly on AI. It enhances our lives in tons of ways that we grow increasingly. The good news is that we're inherently distrustful of putting a machine or anything in charge that we don't understand. And we can task these machine learning algorithms to make decisions, but we can't really task them to make informed decisions, right? And one of the core values that we have in this, I guess our country's socioeconomic, governmental ideology is we allow the small voice to run. We allow the little guy to keep the big guy from overrunning them entirely. That's one of the core principles that that this country was founded on. That is an ongoing conversation about where we're at in that struggle, whether or not it should wash or bend, whatever. But we don't really put those systems in charge because of their inability to consider new and unfamiliar things. Should we be concerned? We should be concerned about the person deploying those and their motivations. We should be concerned about things like one of my pet peeves is social media. Right? They use these algorithms extensively, and some of them are, well, all of them want you to engage, and many of them are using outrage. Right? They create outrage, and they pit people against each other, and the next thing you know, this social media, which is supposed to bring us closer together, isolates us, and suddenly we're attacked on both sides, and that's our reason. And when we succumb to that, we lose control. Right? We're no longer in charge of our social experience. We're under attack, and we feel compelled to defend. And when we're doing that, we're vulnerable, right? Because we've already succumbed to that first suggestion. That's the kind of thing that I worry. Luckily, Tesla put their automatic cars out, and we're all kind of aware, at least on some level, of the reality that we can't put machines in charge in dangerous situations because they're not always going to get it right. Yeah, I'm so glad that we did that because now we know it's a bad idea to think about things like putting them in charge of flying airplanes. So, yeah, I think what happens is that when you clarify, we're talking about lowercase AI, immediately and permanently the conversation becomes, okay, who's the man behind the curtain? Right? That's the person. That's who we need to become. And I think that the big conversation that we'll have in our lifetime will come down to ethical use of these advanced tools. That's what we should be talking about. That's what we should be concerned about. And that's what I mean when I say the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because it's always been about people trying to control each other to gain some sort of advantage.
When you're talking about the person who has his finger on the nuclear button.
I would say that I'm talking about the person who has his finger on your button.
Oh.
Which may be nuclear anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If I, with the push of a button and control your behavior throughout the district or through any means, then I'm the one you need to work with. It's not the vehicle through which I do that. It's me and my motivations.
Sorry, another question. One of the things I worry about is the use of AI to distort realities or to present a political opponent, to create an image that says, look what they said, or look what they did. They're a terrible person, vote for me, that kind of thing. Sure. Or even the government, of course, not the United States, of course, but some government out there creating an image or a narrative using AI as a false flag in order to legitimate, going to war or whatever. So is there any way, is there a digital trace about an AI image or video or something like that, that someone could point to and say, that's not a real photograph or movie, that has been generated by AI, therefore it's not real? Is that kind of accountability possible?
Yes and no. The technology exists in a very well fleshed out capacity. We use AI to detect other AI all the time across various types of media. The problem is that it takes longer to vet the information than it does to create a whole bunch of copies that are all different, right? How many images can you create using AI with a single sentence, right? As many as you tell it you want. How long does it take to vet each one and realize that those are false, right? It becomes this, it becomes a game where the real question is, do you want to spend every waking moment fact checking? And so we're continuously inundated by semi-true and not at all true information. Again, to motivate us to create this outrage. And that's the problem. Like in my lifetime, I have seen the news go from requiring several sources to that was the legal requirement for that was removed. And now I can go to the internet, I can spend 5 seconds on the internet and see a quote unquote news story about what somebody said on the internet, on social media, and it's portrayed exactly the same as any other news source. So again, it's the person with their finger on my butt. That's who's dangerous.
I think you had an experience with this, right? With the poster you were saying for your band. And
yeah, well, we've been, as you're talking about music and having, making music with AI, I want to play music professionally. And we hire artists to do posters for us. And when we don't vet that artist and they create a poster that has either all AI or some AI, we put that poster out. There's on Instagram, there's an account called AI Cop, and they hone in on that, they flag us, and then we get backlash. And say, don't support this band because they're not supporting the artists. Very interesting. I mean, it's not true. And so the finger on my button, but I do want to think, and I enjoyed how you concluded it, where we're kind of at now, that it's a tool, and it's the person behind it. And I've said this a lot. A hammer can be used to build a house for Habitat for Humanity, or it can be a murder weapon.
Yeah.
And because of that, when I walk down the aisle at Lowe's with all the hammers, I'm not scared of the wall of hammers. It doesn't scare me. Yeah. And that's kind of how I'm working to approach walking past this wall of AI. And it's not the wall of AI that's scary to me. It's who's using it. And hammers are very simple technology. There's only so much damage you can do with a hammer or an axe. Put a chainsaw in somebody's hand, And you can clear cut an entire forest in a matter of that. When it used to be an axe, it took you some time in it. And I think the key is that for me is to increase the awareness, because the more advanced the technology, like you saw, it decreases the awareness of what you're doing with it because it's service.
Bert, have we got that video, by the way?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So I've been thinking about your comments around, well, you had different topics. What I'm focused on is one of who's got the finger, right? Who's behind it. And so I'm wondering in what arena, where right now are those conversations happening? The conversations about the ethical use, the conversations about who has the information, the comment you're saying about who is trying to push our finger, right? Where does that conversation where can we have legitimate conversations about that and the curbing of the power and the ethical application? Your comment about the use as an example, as someone who used to teach, doesn't exist anymore, consumer health class, we would talk about there are certain criteria, the critical thing. The news organizations has these criteria that we agreed to. We never agreed to any on social media. And so they now will post news as if it's news, but it doesn't have to meet the same criteria. And that's an ongoing conversation in our family. So I guess what I'm asking is, where does the conversation happen? I know in Europe it happens a lot. The European Parliament, they are making laws about some of this, but I don't know where in the United States these conversations are happening. Yeah.
I think that across the board, the conversations are happening, but the fact that we don't know that they're happening means that they're not changing things. They're not shaping things. One of the core. So the problem is that it is a universal conversation in American politics that's been around since, well, for as long as American politics. This idea of the individual freedom versus the benefit of the group. And across the board, we hesitate to hedge individual freedoms for no reason that I can think of as being any good. We extend that to commercial interests. Right? We sort of take this approach that because a person is behind this commercial interest, we want to postpone curtailing what they're doing until we're compelled otherwise, right? So, and then, we could talk for like about how we got to this current place in American politics where we're pretty convinced that the other guy is not even worth hearing. Thank you, social media. I would, I guess, to give an answer that is somewhat tangible, I think the more important question is, where aren't we having a conversation? Why aren't we talking about this? You mentioned Parliament. Why aren't we talking about this in Congress? In a Socratic. Why aren't we seeking solutions for that?
You guys know what you guys are just answering this. You, as a person who is very knowledgeable in this, and other engineers who are thinking in this way, are the people looking at education for the population at large on these issues? It seems to me that we're in the dark pretty much about how to learn to trust or not trust? How do you differentiate these different pieces of AI and all the other complex pieces of the internet? And how do we do that? And is anyone doing it? Education as far as children, adults.
I've seen many examples of teaching children how to be more cognizant of being influenced by their online interactions. I've seen quite a bit of looking out for people trying to scam me. Clearing up the really important distinction between capital AI and lowercase AI. That's because I don't know of any business that would benefit from making that distinction everywhere.
Right, thinking maybe not business, but I'm thinking outside of business. In the, you know, you are in a role that people in that same place you are might be avidly thinking about. How do we advocate? How do we educate people at large to be able to be better discerners?
Sure. So I obviously live and work in academia.
Well, I'm not saying that you should, but there are people in this country who have those kinds of skills.
Totally. So we know these distinctions, but unfortunately, as a scholar, I have a one-sided love-hate relationship with the American public that's controlled by the politicians who are trying to get elected. So how the public views my voice flip-flops. Goes back and forth. I have no part of the conversation at all. I'm just researching my science thing, which, you know, leads to me having insights about other stuff. But whether or not anybody listens is well beyond my yeah, it's
And then those pain in the butt Quakers invite you to come. All through this, thank you so much, Stu, for a lot of that. All through this discussion, our friend Eric has been sitting here, and Eric has started coming here, and welcome, by the way. Eric works in AI as well, and I wonder if something has.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask a question because you just talked about pain in the butts, and that seemed like a good segue for pain. I don't know what group that I work in Amazon Web Services. So I'm not developing AI, I'm not creating AI, but my job is now intersecting with it. Like it's one of my coworkers, and I'm being asked to work with it. And it's smart enough to read code and to recommend code. It's inside my development environment, recommending my comments. And you know, as far as me being a pain in the butt, one of the first questions I asked AI when I was told by my boss to start working with it was, "Who is Jesus Christ?" Because I just want to know, like, what does it think? You made a very good point on stage that the large language model is slanted and biased towards the volume of words. You know, so if you ask like a Chinese LLM who is God, you're going to get a different answer than a Christian LLM. You know, and if you don't know who the LLMs are, then you don't know what answer you're getting. And I was an atheist for a really long time, and now that I'm a believer, to me, it seems like when I look at Jesus Christ, who was the Word in the beginning, who became flesh, that he ultimately is the greatest of all LLMs. And 200 years ago, when we relied on the Holy Spirit in Quaker meeting to lift us up and have us speak, we were all praying to that large LLM to lift us up and speak, and to trust the intuition of a phenomenon that none of us can comprehend. to generate answers and intuitions for us. So I've been thinking about like how to ask a question. How to make a comment and ask a question, because I've worried quite a lot about this. And what I wanted to start with was I'm 38 years old, and I've experienced going from like sitting at my dinner table as a child where my brother and my dad and I are having a terrible argument about some fact, what it means, and whether it's true or false. And when we would have to go and find the source of truth, it would take my dad 20 minutes of paging through an encyclopedia before he'd have an answer. And that was 20 minutes for the Holy Spirit to bring us all back to peace and unity. While we're getting an answer. But now, there's like an instantaneousness going on here where I read the book of James when I first converted, and we talked about like, if any of us has a question, let's go to God and he'll answer it immediately. And 2,000 years ago, that was him talking about intuition, bringing us closer to our knowledge. And one of the things that I realized when I was looking at my phone was like, this is kind of like the cybernetic father. Like if I need a question answered, I like pull this thing out. I'm like, come on, Google, tell me my answer. And even 30 years ago, it took a long time for a lie to travel around the world. And now someone can lie, and like 2 seconds later, I'm being lied to.
Mm-hmm. Passing it on.
Passing it on, yeah. And so there's like this. There's, I really love this distinction between capital AI and lowercase AI that you talked about. To me, what makes me most afraid actually is the distance between this thing and my brain. Like in my lifetime, I don't think capital AI is going to necessarily come about, but something is happening where it's like as we get faster and faster at using this thing. And then when it like is plugged into our head, what is going to be the difference between me and this thing? And I feel like I'm going to witness in my lifetime, like my child, he's 3.5 years old, but he might reach a point where he can't get a job because he's unwilling to be plugged into this thing. Like he's unwilling to like be getting answers so instantly. And already, without even being neurologically plugged into it, it's already changing what I am willing to have in my brain. It's like, I don't need to know the weather, I don't need to plan certain things, I don't need to know certain facts. I remember when I was in school, it's like, why would I learn calculus? I have a graph calculator. And now you've got people who could rightly say, why would I have to learn how to write an essay? I've got AI. And like, as that shift happens, I'm not worried about capital AI coming about. I'm actually worried about the number of human beings who believe we have invented capital AI. Because if that reaches a critical mass, then it's just in the eye of the beholder. We've invented capital AI, even if it's just a giant thing that's like calculating an answer, like a program. If we worship it like capital AI, then it is capital AI. It's become capital AI. And to your point, like whoever's the button pusher behind that lowercase AI that's acting like capital AI turns into our overlord, turns into the one that we go like, oh, that guy's got the answer. I don't need to have it anymore. So I'm how am I like turning this into a prompt for a question?
Doesn't need to be.
Well, I say this first and foremost as a prayer to the fathers to engage people's thinking in this room. Like, what are we worried about really? But as a prompt, Elon Musk is working on things like Neuralink, and you're in a field of synthetic neural systems, and even if capital AI is really far off, like how close are we to being able to think at our computer instead of touch a keyboard?
So the theme that I'm getting, if there is a theme woven throughout that, is this question of how much am I in control of me, and how much is this influenced by not only the AI but my interface with technology. Starting point, body really smart, driver really dumb. One of my favorite examples of that is we think that access to information clears up the confusion. That is not true. Every smartphone in existence houses a calculator and access to much better calculators. And yet, some of the conversations that are crazy popular online are arguments about a math problem. Every single person having that conversation has a calculator in their hand while they're arguing. That's my strength. And the reason that it's such a popular conversation has nothing to do with math or fact. It has to do with outrage that the other guy is wrong. I think the conversation ends up being about how much access we give the, I guess, the digital world and the people behind it over our paradigms, over our values, and most importantly, over our behavior. The thing, in your example, the argument led to finding the answer with the goal of agreement, right? And it turns out that Socratic approach, that arguing for alignment, is not very profitable, because the idea is to end the argument, to disengage in it. That's not profitable. The internet is not trying to get you to like your other person. They're trying to sell you something. They're trying to keep you engaged, and enemies create fear. Fear is universal. It's very easy. Once you make somebody afraid, you can control them. If we are to find a solution, I think we should look there. How much access are we giving these people, really these actors, over our emotional selves? Because when they get my emotions, they get my behavior, and then my well-being. Yeah, so what we need is to return to general values. And when we do that, when we insist on that, when we demand that our interactions are only with those whose values, at least at the base level, align with our own, that's when we can start to change things. Neuralink, not really worried about, because when you talk to the world's most knowledgeable person about how the brain works, they point to regions. Each of those regions has 500,000 neurons. It's not very precise. Which greatly restricts how much you can interact. If you stick a node into the brain anywhere and you give electricity, you're not hitting one node, you're hitting a lot. When you see the brain wave activity, we've also those images. What's the resolution of the image versus the resolution of the actual? There's 86 billion neurons in your brain. That's a lot. That's way more than we can power on the planet. Your grandchildren, your children's grandchildren, probably won't see capital AI come into existence in earnest. However, lowercase AI can and is being leveraged to manipulate large swaths of people of everything. And just like electricity, just like technology, it's the actors and the principles within which they work that ultimately matter. I remember seeing posters about anti-street light posters from the early 1800s. People were against that, and reasonable conversation. What are they doing to our environment by creating these street lights? How is this electricity going to affect our brains? Right? That was actually a real conversation for a long time. what's the power grid? How does that influence our brain? Right? We heard that about cell phones. How much is it affecting my brain? The radiation, right? Like heart rate next to my head. Well, it turns out that your alarm clock has 20 times more radiation than your phone. It's a good question. It's those kinds of questions that when we insist on the answer, or when we insist on, hey, we should know these things so that we can make informed decisions, that's where we ought to be going.
Okay, back in 1971, it had a movie out called PHX 1138. And in that movie, the children had an arm thing plugged into them that was giving them their school lessons. So they were out playing while their brain was attending school. That is not going to happen, please.
Good film, though. Dakota, you had a question?
Oh, yeah. Hi,
No,
everyone.
she's got to take
I work in social media, so this is actually an interest of mine, and I'd like to say I love this conversation. And actually, I think this conversation, I'm glad we're having it now, but we should have started talking about it when we had a switch in social media from chronological feeds to suggested feeds. So basically what you're seeing is like, oh, this happened, so it's on the top, by time, chronological. But it happened when I was in middle school. I actually remember being in the middle school bathroom, and now I'm 23. So this was probably 10, 15 years ago that this happened. But how I think social media and then politics today, how it's such a crazy conversation. A documentary I just watched about a month ago called The Great Hack. It's about Cambridge Analytica. Maybe you guys have heard the names, maybe you haven't. If you haven't, I would highly suggest watching that documentary. It talks about social media and how it can be weaponized for political gain and how it has been weaponized in some elections. And I think that's a big fear right now that people are having with AI, but this has been a thing that's gone on already. So that was my recommendation.
Friends, we need to continue this conversation on Wednesday night.
I'm going to use my
So please join us if you can. We'll start at 6:30. Will be a brief presentation that I'll make, and then we'll open up for a conversation. And then, of course, we will also continue the conversation next Sunday morning. Let's, in the traditional way, thank our guest Stu for being with us. And let's watch the video for 2 minutes.
Yes.
Which one first?
Let's just do the George Fox.
Okay. Hang on a minute. Allow. On. What was it saying right there? Mirror image? Hold on. Was it saying to you?
Choose the mirror from the menu.
Choose to mirror from the menu.
Okay, menu. Sorry, guys. Oh, man. Escape.
Well, we might have to do it next week.
Yeah.
Or Wednesday night.
This one? She's content. Okay. Ready?
Yep. We got sound? We'll
Should.
find out.
There should be
So
sound.
the image to a real person, this was done by Mid-Journey through Discord, just giving it instructions and then animating it. So this image here was entirely
Hello,
generated.
Daniel, and my warm greetings to all of Reedwood Friends meeting. After all this time, it's wonderful to see you. Well, as you all know, my basic insight was that Christ has come to teach his people himself, and so we wait, often in quiet, for our present teacher.
You know
Now
what?
remember, friends, this is
We'll
not
work on
really
this
George
and get it
Fox,
for next
born
week.
in 1624, but AI can do
But,
some interesting
I mean,
things,
the
can't
program
it?
that I paid,
Imagine the educational
$2
possibilities, while we
totally
also
animated,
justifiably
still
worry
picture,
about abuse.
and placed the words that I placed in its mouth and translated it to a British accent.
That's the danger, but also the provocative promise.
Okay. I just pulled it, played it.
Hello, Daniel, and my warm greetings to all of Reedwood Friends meeting. After all this time, it's wonderful to see you. Well, as you all know, my basic insight was that Christ has come to teach his people himself, and so we wait, often in quiet, for our present teacher. Now remember, friends, this is not really George Fox, born in 1624, but AI can do some interesting things, can't it? Imagine the educational possibilities, while we also justifiably worry about abuses. That's the danger, but also the provocative promise of AI. It isn't anything I could have imagined in my day, but you can in your time. Warm greetings to beloved friends everywhere, and you in Portland. Your digital friend, George Fox.
Less than an hour that was produced.
Do you think you actually would have talked about that particular kind of accent, though? I know he's British.
Oh.
But it might have been a different.
Of course. The more hours you put into it,
yeah,
the more accurate you can get it.
Yeah.
Joshua thought he was too young.
Yeah.
Images too young, but in any case, just a
No,
little
I
taste.
thought it was, you would put that original accent, wouldn't you? Rather than, you know, the.
Probably north. Probably north.
Yeah.
Thank you, friends.
Stop record right now.
You're kidding.